that you have to give up the Eurovision to be able to see this. Okay, and I can see that we are live. So, hey everybody, how are you doing? If you're watching this in the replay, then just click below and I will have put in the description or a comment all of the timestamps of the questions, and you can check that out. And if you're joining us today, then hello. And after this, then go to the link in the top right of the screen and you'll see me. You can join in a kind of language related game. And yes, I'm wearing my very fashionable Google glass today. I'm actually selling them. I happen to have a table full of stuff that I'm selling on Craigslist, eBay, and whatever. And this happened to be among them. So, let's see. Yeah, I can see we're connecting on all the various platforms here. And I want to make sure that I'm seeing all of your questions. Yeah, you're all coming through here. So, if, let's see, we've got lots of people saying hello. We've got Angry Guy on YouTube, Sevda on, actually, yeah, on YouTube as well. Abed, hello. And Angry Guy is in Egypt. And Diana, looking fine today, Benny. Thank you. I'm very glad that you like my fashionable Google Glass. Lauren won these for me in a competition, and I've only ever used them when they're turned off. I've only ever used them when they're turned off like this, because it's funny. So, so Diana has a question about rolling the R, but tomorrow I'm actually going to be doing a live Q&A specifically about pronunciation. So I look forward to seeing your questions related to that. And let's talk about pronunciation tomorrow. So anything related to pronunciation, we're not going to talk about that today. I want to help you with any other questions that you may have. Okay? So, no, I'm not seeing my Facebook comments come in yet. So if you don't see your comment on the screen here, don't worry. Holly is the moderator today, and she is going to be helping me figure out which questions are the most active ones. Oh, there we go. I can start seeing Facebook questions from people. Okay. So, I'm glad I got your name right, Sevda. More or less. I hope I got it right. Gonzalo on Facebook is in Uruguay. Saludos. Okay. So, first question that I'm seeing come up. I've got a few random ones here, but I'm going to kind of pick them as I see them. Joanna says, what's your favorite part of Esperanto culture? Are you looking forward to the polyglot gathering in Bratislava? I'm definitely looking forward to the polyglot gathering in Bratislava. My favorite part of the Esperanto culture, I think, would be its open-mindedness. When I went to those events, for me, Esperanto was originally just a fun little side project. I didn't think I was going to keep at it in the long term. But when I went to the Esperanto gatherings, I found people who came from very different backgrounds and were like open-minded about things about vegetarianism, and they were open-minded about who they could date and stuff. And I thought that was a very good, forward-thinking community, and I was very happy to see that. So that's kind of what I liked about it. Let's see. Naviman says, hey Benny, how you doing? I'm doing great. I'm feeling in a silly mode today. That's why I'm wearing my Google Glass, as you can see. And how do you choose which language to learn? If I really like to learn two, it's a tough one. If you really want to learn two, you can do that, but maybe learn one first and then the other. But the way I always chose my languages, I don't know if this might help you, is that I would try to interact with the people for that culture, and that would make me see how they are, how they think, if I enjoy interacting with them. So like I didn't tackle Chinese or Mandarin for a very long time until I met people from Taiwan, and they inspired me to want to take on that language. So you might want to do something along those lines when you do get into picking which language you want. Maybe decide if you can watch some TV in one language and in the other for over a week, or interact with people if you can find them in meetups and so on. It's actually blocking my eye, isn't it? Let me see how it looks like this. How does that look? Even more silly. Excellent. That's what I like. Okay. Yeah, give both the languages a try. See if one jives with you, that you would enjoy more, that you'd find you're more passionate about, and then focus on that first. It doesn't mean you won't do the second language, but you will potentially get that first language down better, and then you'll be more available to do the second language. Okay? All right. Let's see. Ian says he loves the hat. Thank you for that. Tips on Mandarin time phrases. I can't think of any good tips specifically. If anyone else has it for Rocky Antonio over on YouTube, share it in the comments. But yeah, I'm trying to think relatively quickly to get through all of these. So let me see what else I can do. Shorio Walames, if I got that right. I'm guessing I didn't. And, you know, I'm accepting that. I make mistakes. I get things wrong a lot. And I'm open to that. So Shorio asks, how long did it take you to learn Esperanto? I would say about 6 or 7 weeks to get to the stage where I was very confident conversational level. But I did come from already speaking Italian, Spanish, and French. And so that kind of, as well as English. And I had learned German in school, but I couldn't speak it yet when I first started to learn Esperanto. So I would say that those 6 weeks, I kind of had that head start because of the other languages. But even so, there was a lot of overlap. If you know 1 or 2 European languages, you really have a good head start. So you can learn it relatively quickly. Okay. Guillaume Lepaulin de Raro asks about starting a language blog, if I have any tips on that. It's very complicated, obviously, but I would say biggest tip maybe to try to integrate it with as many other channels as you can. Like, for instance, a lot of people have given me the suggestion that I'd like to follow through soon if I can, of maybe putting some of my YouTube videos on a podcast, you know? And this is, like, other than that, I try to integrate a lot of things. So I have, like, Facebook, I have YouTube, I do live on Beam and do gaming things there, and I have the blog, and like I try to follow people on Medium and comment there. So you try to do as many different things as you can, and then have the link to your blog as the link in your bio. So for Twitter, for instance, since I want to boost my YouTube subscriber numbers up this year, the link in my Twitter bio goes to my blog. So if any of you are starting a blog or starting a YouTube channel and you want to encourage people to watch your videos as you share your language learning journeys, maybe kind of try to be active not just on the blog, but also in other places and link to the blog. Okay? All right. So hope that answers that question. Okay. I know you've been to a lot of... So Diana asks the question, I know you've been to a lot of different Spanish countries. Do you think there... Okay. This is a very specific question. Do you think there are many job opportunities for a cake decorator? I would like to move to Latin America one day, but that's my only talent. Okay, so firstly, I think maybe part-time comedian could also be one of your only talents. Sorry, that... I'm not trying to be mean. That was actually a very funny segue from my perspective here. But absolutely, I actually remember in my travels I met people with such interesting jobs. I met one person who helped people give up smoking. So she was a kind of a therapist, but she did it over Skype. So she would Skype people to help them get over smoking and talk them through it. I don't really know how it works. But she traveled the world with that job. And I met somebody else who was a massage therapist who managed to use her like connections to local communities, so she knows that she could be like with trustworthy clients, and she traveled the world with that job. So you can, with many jobs, move to another country and make it work. For something specific like that, a cake decorator, I would say, why not? I mean, find cake shops in Latin America, check them out, and you will be surprised. I always use that as an advantage. So in my case, for instance, I would say, when I started looking for jobs as an English teacher, and I had limited experience initially, I would say, I bet you have so few Irish people applying for this job, and if you want to be a good English school, you need to be teaching many forms of English. So bring some Irishness to the mix and use that as your advantage. So tell this cake shop or whatever that, use your international twist to add to their cakes. Just as a random idea. Okay, so over on Beam, we have SC8ing. Hi there. Hashtag Beam Love. So it says he/she, can't tell by the numbered username. You've said Brazil is one of the friendliest places you've ever visited or / favorite country. Would you say the rest of South America is similar? Very good question. Okay. So I would say the rest is similar in that it's easy to make friends. It's easy to approach people. There are many places that are very open, for sure. Some places I would say equally friendly as many parts of Brazil. However, I did find Brazil in general to be easier to kind of talk to people in a relaxed way, informally. So for instance, I had a great time in Colombia. I found them very, very friendly there. But I also found it a little confusing that some of my friends would still refer to me using usted, which is this formal way of saying you. And it would kind of drive me a little crazy sometimes. But I kind of started using a lot of my European Spanish. They tend to curse a little bit more in Spain. So I was producing more curse words and they were very shocked. So I felt like, I don't know, someone who's just escaped from prison or something, some negative character and bad influence to the world. But they were still very, very open to making friends. And I just found it slightly more easygoing in Brazil. And then places like Buenos Aires, that I lived in Argentina, they had this more kind of upper class feel. And it depends, obviously. It depends on which part of the city that you're in. And there are some places that you'll just have completely different experiences. But I just happened to find Brazil overall to be that kind of shade of friendly that worked easier for me while I was traveling by myself. Okay, so Mandy Monroe on Facebook asks, how many hours a day do you devote to languages during your 3-month challenges? What does this actually entail? And then lists of various things. I'm struggling to pace my learning to make it effective, and I'm not progressing as fast as I'd like. Okay, this question comes up a few times, and let me very briefly say that it's not about how many hours a day I spend on that language. It's about how many hours a day I spend on English, So my rule when I've got an intensive 3-month project is I can use English as part of my job. So maybe if I'm writing on my blog or if I'm teaching English, and to Skype my parents, and that's it. So that means that everything else has to be in that language. If I'm watching TV, it has to be in that language. If I'm socializing, it has to be in that language, even if it's with other learners. And if you're more limited, you're somewhere that you wouldn't be able to interact with people in that language, you limit it. You say, I get like 4 hours socializing in English in these next 3 months. The rest of the time has to be about that language. So don't think of it as what's the magic number of hours you put into the language. Think of it as the minimum amount of time that you can realistically speak your mother tongue. And that's the way I would prefer to think of these things. Okay, let me flick through random comments before I go to the next one suggested by Holly for me over here. Let's see. Okay. So, all right, I'll go over back to Holly's because I'm flicking through several here that I didn't see anything jump out at me. So, Midnight Ward 666 over on YouTube asks, many believe children are naturally much faster than adults at picking up languages. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, it's a very controversial idea because it's both true and it's not true for the reasons people think it is. So it creates a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies that kind of make it even more true for the wrong reasons. So essentially, I think that children have a necessity to learn a language. You know, they need to communicate. They need to be able to say they're hungry and to learn things in school. So they have to learn the language. That if they don't, they won't be able to function in society. So that necessity forces them to learn a language, and they learn it in a very efficient, immersive environment. So they will learn the language and they'll pick it up a lot better than an adult slash a child would in a purely academic environment. So when you think about it, when children learn their mother tongue, when I was learning English growing up, I could be a baby and just say gaga, food, mama, and that I wasn't getting like corrected. I didn't get a big red X for not pronouncing the syllables right or whatever it was. I just was trying to communicate. I was outputting as much of the language as I could. And then later on, I got to the polishing up stage. So I think that the way that adults tend to learn languages is less efficient. It doesn't mean you have to learn it that way, but the way that we tend to do it in group classrooms and studying for exams is not the most efficient way to be able to truly interact with a language. And so the children's way of doing it is more efficient, but that doesn't mean that they're naturally faster and better. It means that their approach is better. So I try to emulate that approach as much as I can. Now, you could say that their brain is more malleable, and that makes it better to learn the language faster. I would counter that and say that maybe an adult's brain is actually at a huge advantage because you've already learned an entire language, whereas they're starting from scratch. So, you know, if you imagine a baby that's just been born, when it's 6 months old, it can be a lot of stuff. But if I've had 6 months to intensively learn a language, you know, I'm not saying that you could absolutely 100% with certainty reach the level of fluency, but maybe you could have pretty decent conversations, you know? And that's way better than any baby would ever be able to do. So keep that in mind, that it's not about children being better learners than adults. It's the technique. So try to emulate that yourself. Okay. So let me see. Ishita Sashena or Saxena on YouTube says, "Hey Benny, I want to learn Mandarin. Would you suggest starting with the Pinyin system or going straight to traditional Chinese characters? Thanks." Well, firstly, traditional Chinese characters are only relevant to Chinese in Taiwan, or if you're learning Cantonese for Hong Kong. So don't think that's in any way better, unless, like, if your idea is that you want to go to mainland China or you want to be able to follow the majority of Chinese outputted, it's actually going to be simplified Chinese. So just a little FYI for you there. But to directly answer your question, I would highly recommend you start with the Pinyin system, because what I was just saying a moment ago about how adults learn and how children learn, when you think about it, how a Chinese child learns how to communicate is they do not learn how to write Chinese characters before they learn how to speak. Obviously, they don't. They learn how to communicate with their parents and anyone else in their family or their teachers through the spoken language. And then they'll learn how the written system. And in our case, as somebody, like people coming from languages that have the same letters of the alphabet as we do in English or other European languages, it helps to use Pinyin because the hint of how it's pronounced in a much more direct way. So I would start with that, be able to communicate, be able to speak, and then move on to the written system after that. And you'll find it's a little bit easier, actually, to learn written Chinese when you are a confident, at least beginner conversational speaker. All right? So that's what I would say for that. And Sevde Sayin has on YouTube also, which language is the easiest for you? Esperanto. Simple as that. Reasons I gave before. I learned it very quickly. It's designed to be learned very quickly, so the easiest language. There's not much more I can say about it beyond that. Okay, Diana asks, at what stage would you recommend learning idioms? Okay, very good question. Idioms, I would say, I wouldn't get to that until maybe the intermediate stages as well. There are certain like expressions that you definitely need to know, and some idioms come up often that you might see them, and just you have to be able to use them in conversation. But in general, I would say that you get your basic ability to communicate in the language down, and then you get to those. So for instance, in my case with Spanish, I didn't really learn properly a lot of Spanish idioms until I was at that solid B2 level. And I got like an entire book filled with them. Things like vivir al cuerpo del rey. So in English, we say live like a king. In Spanish, they say to live like the body of a king, which I think is actually a better description, because the mind of a king has weighed down with all of these annoying logistical things and how many people you're going to go to war with. Whereas the body of a king just gets to eat all of that food, whereas everyone else is starving to death. So, I liked that, and that was part of my learning idioms thing. But I think it would not have been as good an investment of my time as a beginner. So wait until you're a pretty advanced intermediate learner. Okay, so let's see. Sockbox on YouTube says, I was wondering if, as an Irish person, you recommend my plan to take the Leaving Cert exams in these languages. How did you find your exams in school? Okay, so the Leaving Cert exams are the exams we take at the end of secondary school / high school in Ireland. And Sockbox wants to take a bunch of languages. And if you can do that, then great, go for it. And you'll get a nice boost from what you do. It may not be the most efficient way, but then again, I could be completely wrong about that, because I took the Leaving Cert in the 90s. Back in my day, we didn't have any of this technology, and so I don't know. Maybe it's improved since then. But I would, if possible, try to steer yourself towards just one or two. Get them down really, really well while you can. And then later on, you'll be able to take on as many languages as you can. I think in school, because they may not be learned as efficiently as you could by yourself, you want to just take on one or two and not overburden yourself. So that's what I would say for that. Okay, so let's see. We got a few people saying hello. I won't be staying for the full hour today, just to let you guys know. And as a reminder, I'll be over on Beam. There's this really fun game called Use Your Words, and it's like a game show thing that you can interact with me, and there's like a very short delay if it's on Beam. So I wouldn't do that on YouTube because there's like a 10-second delay, and I want to make sure you get to buzz in the same time I do. So if anyone's interested in that, just go to the link you see in the top right and follow me there, and I will very gladly play this game with my fellow language learners. Okay, so Shannon on Facebook says, great to see you again. I'm off for 6 weeks. What should my daily and weekly self-study program be like? My daily and weekly plan include italki lessons, and I started your book for French. Should I apply the techniques and topics and chapters in your book, but for Russian? Okay, so I presume you've got the language hacking French book, and like that can be applied from a learning philosophical viewpoint to other languages. But for Russian, make sure that you learn Cyrillic as soon as you can, and it's not that hard. It's an alphabet with just slightly more letters that you would be used to, and just learn everything, pronounce it, practice it. I think Judith Mayer, I know I used one of her books for Arabic, so I think she might have one for Russian, but otherwise Lauren is a fan of Teach Yourself Cyrillic, so I would start with that. And then otherwise, the techniques that I talk about, maybe I wouldn't use my language hacking French necessarily, because that's very much geared towards French. I would see if you can follow what I do on my YouTube channel, or maybe have a read through Fluent in 3 Months, the first book I wrote, because that's more about the general process of language learning without being tied down to one language. So other than that, since I don't have a specific experience in Russian, I would just say the general things that I always tell people, which it seems you're doing, the italki lessons, and making sure you come up with some kind of a plan and have milestones that you're aiming towards. Okay? All right, so zooming on. Let's see. Sorry if I'm skipping a few questions. I'll be doing more of these. But like I said, tomorrow I'll be back again 5 hours before I started this one. And I'll be talking about pronunciation. So any questions you have about pronunciation, store them, file them away, come back tomorrow and hit me with them. All right? Okay, so Betul or says, are you a polyglot? Yes, I'm a polyglot. Excellent question. Thank you. Appreciate it, I think. Okay. Another question about how many hours a day should we do? Yeah. Okay. Many children, discussing the children thing. Okay, so let's see. Holly suggests I take this question from Bartek Bezmasla, if I got that right. Sorry if I didn't. Who says, I've been learning one language for a year now. I feel really confident in it, and there's no problem with daily communication. I found a job that's based in a language, but it still happens really often that I can't understand newly met people. What would you have any advice for me? Okay, congratulations that you feel confident and you're able to do daily communication. I think that what you're describing, that sounds like you've reached essentially, I'm going to guess, a B1 level, lower intermediate in the language, because that sounds very familiar to me, that I'm at a level where when I interact with somebody and they know that I'm not a native speaker, they may slow down for my benefit. And when they do that, when they slow down, when they don't use overly complicated words, then we could talk about a lot of stuff. We can talk about pretty much anything as long as they're flexible in how we work around my lack of vocabulary. The problem is that when people don't know initially that I'm a learner, or they're not used to speaking to learners, or when I try to follow other people, they speak too quickly for me. I'm not ready for that yet. So this is a problem of listening comprehension. And the way you deal with listening comprehension, the way I've personally found most effective, is intentional listening practice. So a huge mistake that I personally made when I was preparing for my German C2 exam was just to have the radio on. I had the radio on in German and it was blasting all day long, and I figured I'm getting hearing practice, so I gotta be improving my hearing skills. And I kind of realized, unfortunately, when I did not pass the listening test in the end, that I was getting hearing practice, but I was not getting listening practice. So you need to intentionally listen to people who are speaking the language, break it down, slow it down, repeat segments until you understand them better, increase the complexity of how they speak, and force yourself to adapt to the faster spoken language. One way that helps you do this without you having to overburden yourself with preparing things and searching for things are podcasts designed for language learners. So if you search my blog, Fluent in 3 Months, just search for it for podcasts. You'll see a long list of the podcasts that I recommend. Check that out, and you will see a tool that I've personally used to improve my listening comprehension. And I find it's very effective because they space them out. They have different levels for different levels that you might be in. And I always aim for the level above where I am at. And it's always very, very hard, and it forces me out of my comfort zone. So that's what I would recommend. Okay? So that might help you to be able to understand newly met people, because they will speak to you at normal speeds. They're going to be using words you may not have heard yet. So you need to kind of push your listening comprehension up, and you'll be able to deal with that. Okay? All right, let's see as I flick through what I can see here. Jason Hayford on YouTube says, how do I avoid direct translation? Translating directly word for word from a native tongue into my target language. One way, Jason, is to use laddering. If you happen to already speak a language, then learn via that language. Another way is to so you see an example in use, and that's going to help. So hope those 3 little tips that I gave help you there. Okay, so Holly tells me that Joanna von Schaik on YouTube asks, what do you find tougher to learn? The technical side of the language or the cultural side? I find it very hard to start Arabic because it mixes with LGBT community so poorly. Well, that is definitely a tough one. I remember when I was in Egypt, for instance, I've written a blog post about the fact that I'm a humanist, which is a way I prefer to refer to being an atheist. And in Western countries, definitely in Europe, and for the most part in America, it's totally fine to be open about that. In Egypt, not so much. So I had to kind of do this really weird mental gymnastics thing where I would decide that I'm going to use how in America, when you meet people, they say that you meet people who say that they're Jewish. They're not actually religiously Jewish. They're culturally Jewish. It doesn't apply to everybody, but some people use the word that way. So I would decide I would tell people I'm Christian and think of it as I'm culturally Christian. I am most certainly influenced by the historical background and so on. And that kind of, it made me feel a little bit more comfortable in when they would talk, because that topic came up a lot in conversation. So that's one way that I personally handled it. But of course, for the moment, it's going to be trickier for LGBT communities. I would try to find LGBT travelers and see what they say, because they may give you tips that work very well. I know my friend Nomadic Matt, he has some guest posters on his blog who talk about traveling, like as a gay couple, as a lesbian couple, and so on. So you may find that comes in handy. And otherwise, I would, to answer your original question, it depends. For European languages, the cultural side has never been that big of an issue for me, because the cultures are obviously different, but they're similar enough that I can switch from one to the other. But the cultural side has been a very big challenge, and I would say a bigger challenge when it comes to other languages. And I had trouble learning Chinese Mandarin, mostly because of the cultural side, because I arrived and I didn't understand the culture. I didn't know how to meet people, and usually that's how I get into languages, and that made that language harder, whereas other languages, it's been the technical side. So it always depends. There's never one particular issue that you might have. Okay, so let's see, last 5 minutes. I'm going to see what I can answer for you guys in this short amount of time. But again, I will be back online, and you're welcome to join me over on Beam. Just search for Polyglot. Also, if you've got an Xbox, apparently you can watch it on an Xbox. They have a streaming thing connected to the Beam service. Log in with your Microsoft credentials or whatever it is. Okay, so Betul says, do you know Tim Donor? I do, and we've met. First time I was in New York in recent years, he showed me around. I mentioned that in a previous Q&A, so you can see me discuss it in more detail then. Okay, and let's see, skipping ahead. Ketete says, hugs from Valencia. Amun Valencia. That's what I'd say for that. Okay. Robert says, hello, Benny. I've been learning Spanish for the better part of a year and a half. It's the first time trying to learn a new language. I feel my own language gets in the way. Okay, but you don't have a question. So I'm sorry you're struggling. I would say, if you're learning, you could be learning a language for 10 years. Don't worry about that. Try to focus on speaking the language, because you will learn it forever. There's always more to learn, but try to just interact with people. I know I can't give you more thorough advice, and I can see I'm having connection issues on all of my other non-YouTube channels. Very sorry about that. I always forget that, and I need to fix it ahead of time in future. Otherwise, I do seem to be working over on Beam. And thank you for the follow, Sarah NZ. most appreciated for following me over on Beam. Okay, so Drew asks, are you familiar with the REM method and garnering your own edited target language only files? I'm working on Mandarin, Chinese, and Japanese at the same time. Ooh, good for you. Very good. So what I am familiar with for your own edited target language only files, I'm not as familiar with the system and what the particular acronym stands for. I would imagine it's rapid eye movement or music band, but I'm sure it stands for something else in this context. But I did, with some fellow learners, see that they were recording audio and creating their own versions of files to study, and it can be very effective. I know Glossica is a big fan of that, and he's kind of developed his method based around that, based around audio that's only ever spoken by native speakers. So this allows less for the possibility of making mistakes, for instance, and especially if you're learning a language such that you want to use it in academic settings, then that can actually be a very effective way to do it. Obviously, it depends on your goals and so on. So I can't say too much more about that because I'm not as experienced in it. Okay. Betul, have you ever tried to learn Turkish, Benny? I have. Search on my YouTube channel. You will find that I sing Istanbul is Constantinople in Turkish. I don't know if anyone else has ever sung that song in Turkish, but I have. I had some friends help me translate the lyrics. I'm in Istanbul wearing a fez and singing in Turkish. So, yeah, that's to answer that question. Okay, and then final question or two. And again, apologies for anyone over on Facebook who got cut off. I will try to fix that for tomorrow. Joanna has a joke about question marks when I say to ask any questions. Okay, so yeah, final question. Back to Sevda Sayun asks, how do you memorize all the words? You know, a lot of languages, it must be hard to memorize the words. Firstly, when you're using them in real spoken contexts, that makes remembering them a little bit easier. But secondly, I use mnemonics, and I've got a couple of videos on my YouTube channel about that. But otherwise, I try to come up with some kind of a system to tie the word in my memory through what it sounds like. And like an example I always like to give people is when you're learning Spanish and you see the word for to fit, it's caber. And that is, in English, it sounds a little bit like cab bear. And you imagine you can't fit a bear in a cab. That's ridiculous. And so that kind of helps you, that image of a bear trying to squeeze into a taxi cab will help you to remember it if you need to say it later. But of course, you're better learning them in context if you can, and using not only mnemonics but flashcards so that you get that spaced repetition to help you see the words. But practice is the way to do it. So the way I'd have a lot of languages in my head is only by getting to each language to as high as a level as I possibly can, and then I can express myself in a good enough way to keep it up and to remember the words more actively. Okay, so I hope that I've answered as many questions as I can. Thanks everyone for sticking around. I'm glad it was working fine on YouTube. I'll check it out for the other ones later. And again, I will have some down below, maybe within an hour or two, I'll have the timestamps so you can see where the questions were. And I hope to see you guys over on Beam the rest of today. I'll be popping in and out, and I'll be playing some games and inviting you guys to play along with me. They're like language related games. I won't be taking any Q&As then, but tomorrow, I just hit my microphone there. Tomorrow I will be back to talk about pronunciation. So want to see your pronunciation questions, anything that's on your mind, pop in. I'll see if I can help. There's obviously pronunciation questions I don't know how to answer, but there's a few little things that I think I could help you guys with. So I might see you tomorrow for that. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by, everybody, and happy language learning.